All right, Clay Squires back at it again, Santa Lucia's High School, U.S. history teacher. All right, so now what we're going to look at is this last benchmark here, the SS912A 3.8. This is a biggie here. Examine the importance of social change and reform in the late 19th centuries, class system, migration from farm to cities, social gospel movement, role of settlement houses, and churches assisting the poor. It's a lot. It sounds like a lot, but it's not. If you can kind of mesh everything together, it makes total sense. Let me show you real quick. All right, so let's really focus in on the economy in the early 20th century. What does that look like? Now, we've largely had a two-class society, but at the turn of the century, in the early 1900s, we started to see a middle class emerge. A smaller middle class started to rise up and take notice of what was going on with impoverished or poor people. Okay, that middle class, some people call them the populists. They were fighting against the big businesses, and they were fighting for the rights of the average man. And at this time, it was very polarized. What do we mean by polarized? Well, the easiest way I can explain polarized is if you look at a globe, we have the North Pole and we have the South Pole. These are on two opposite ends. So when we talk about polarized, we're talking about two different ends of the spectrum, poor and rich. Okay, let me just write that, rich, here's poor. That's what we're talking about when we say polarized society. Have and have not. Now, something happened in this time too that was pretty interesting. Journalists started to come out and expose some of the corruption, some of the dirty truth that major corporations, that cities were hiding. And it was an ugly truth that a lot of people didn't know about. But because of muckrakers, journalists exposing the truth, a lot was revealed. And people didn't like that, which led to great change. So it was a good thing. Pointing out the ugliness of society was a good thing. All right, let's go over here to social gospel. Middle-class progressives, let's remember this word, felt a moral responsibility from their religious faith to aid the urban city poor. Now, progressives, think of a progressive as someone wanting to move forward. If you're a progressive thinker, you're thinking forward, you're outside the box. You're not in the box anymore. You're outside the box. You're thinking differently. New thoughts. Felt a moral responsibility from their religious faith to aid urban city poor. They hated the slums. Remember, this is poor neighborhoods, slums. They didn't like trash, the crime, the working conditions that the average people had to endure. And a lot of them, they were against alcohol. Write this down. That's called the temperance movement. This is when women, typically religious, they were against alcohol, which led to the prohibition of alcohol. Formed church groups to combat social injustices. This is when the Salvation Army comes around. This is when they were formed back in this time. All right. At any moment, just pause the video. If you need to take notes, do that. If you need to try to rewind, do that too. Because there's a lot of important stuff going on, especially with the progressives, the populists. People can get confused by this. Understanding the difference between a polarized society, rich and poor. All of these things are very important. All right, lastly, let's look at the Great Migration. What you begin to see in the United States is a lot of people moving north, looking for jobs. They're looking for jobs in factories. They're looking for jobs in harbors in Boston and New York. The typical farming job starts to go away. It's no longer seen as being important, or it's less important because there's new tractors. So after Reconstruction, lack of farming jobs due to technology and the rise of industrial jobs in the cities in the north drew large quantities of African Americans to cities like New York City, Cleveland, St. Louis, and Chicago. And of course, there's more. We can talk about places like Gary, Indiana. We can talk about places in Ohio. This was called the Great Migration. This is very important, especially when it comes to Black history. African Americans looking for improved job opportunities or a way out. There wasn't a great way forward in the South, so the only way that many African Americans at the time saw opportunity was to go north, was to move north into these cities and try to get better paying positions. Let's take a look here at settlement houses. Settlement houses, they basically established by social reformers to assist the poor to get back on their feet. And then we have immigration over here. European immigrants flooded into the country looking for opportunities to work in urban factories. So not only do you have immigrants moving in, but you also have African Americans moving in. Now, the immigration was largely from Europe, and many European nations were either poor, they were politically or religiously hostile to the people, and the people there had little opportunities for advancement, so they came over also. And in the end, many immigrants landed jobs that were dangerous, they were low paying, and had little room for advancement, so they kind of got stuck. This time in American history wasn't a pretty one, and people really had to struggle and figure out how to move ahead. It was better than what, let's say, the African Americans came from the South, but there were still many struggles ahead. It wasn't easy. All right, I hope you liked the video, and I'll see you back soon.